The storm began without warning. The alien sky tore open with fire, and the once quiet valley became a battlefield of smoke and ruin. Villages burned, the ground shook, and the air filled with screams of fear. Amid the chaos, soldiers from the alien empire clashed with human forces, their weapons flashing like lightning in the night. The war was not meant to happen here, yet it had come like a tide that no one could stop. For the people hiding in caves and shattered homes, survival was all that mattered. In the heart of the storm, a young alien warrior stood. Her name carried weight among her people, for she had sworn an oath of vengeance. Her family had fallen to human fire, and her tribe was scattered across the broken land. The pain in her heart had hardened into a blade sharper than steel. She vowed that if a human crossed her path, she would strike without mercy. Her eyes, glowing like molten amber, carried the promise of death. She waited for the moment to fulfill it. The humans had landed with machines that shook the ground. To her, they were invaders who took what was not theirs, hunters who spread fire wherever they walked. She had watched them from the shadows, her hands gripping her spear, her breath steady with rage. Her people whispered that humans were unstoppable, creatures born from death worlds too strong and too cunning. But she refused to believe they were untouchable. Hatred gave her courage, and courage gave her purpose. She would be the one to kill one. The chance came on a night when the flames lit the horizon. She crept through the ruins, silent as the wind, and saw him. A human soldier stood alone, his weapon resting against a rock, his eyes scanning the darkness. He did not see her yet. His face was strange, not like her kind, but marked by scars of battles fought. His armor was scratched, his hands steady, his stance strong. Something about him made her heart pound faster, not from fear, but from a fury too deep to name. She crouched low, her spear ready. She whispered to herself, this was the one. She leapt from the shadows with a cry that echoed through the night. The human turned just in time, raising his arm to block her strike. Her spear clashed against his gauntlet with a spark, the force sending dust into the air. She expected him to stumble, but he held his ground. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw no hatred in them, only calm and something else she could not understand. But she would not be fooled. She pushed harder, her blade aiming for his chest. She shouted that his kind had destroyed her world and she would end him here. The human did not strike back. Instead, he stepped forward into her attack, letting her weapon press against his armor. His hand reached out and caught her wrist. His touch was firm but not cruel. In that instant, her body froze. She had expected pain, blood, the end of his life or hers. But instead, there was silence. The firelight danced between them, and his grip held her not as an enemy, but as if he refused to let her fall. Something strange spread through her chest, a warmth that clashed with the hatred she had carried for so long. Her vow trembled in her heart, as if it was no longer certain. The warrior's breath faltered. She tried to pull away, but his hold steadied her. He spoke then, his voice low and steady. He said he did not come to kill, but to protect. His words were simple, but they struck her like thunder. She had never heard a human speak like that. Every story told of them as monsters, merciless and cold, yet here he was holding her weapon at his chest and speaking as if her life mattered. She wanted to hate him, to end him, but her hands no longer obeyed. Her mind screamed for revenge, but her heart whispered something new. For the first time, she saw more than an enemy. She saw a man who carried his own pain, his own scars, and a strange light in his eyes that did not match the tales. The war raged on around them, but in that moment the battlefield seemed far away. The fire crackled, the smoke swirled, and the two of them stood locked in a bond neither of them had chosen, a bond that neither could break no matter how much they wanted to deny it. And so, under the broken sky, the warrior who had sworn to kill the human found herself unable to do so. Her vow was strong, but the touch of his hand was stronger. Something had changed forever in that instant, though neither yet understood what it meant. All they knew was that destiny had taken hold, and it would not let go. The clash of their first meeting still echoed in her mind, She should have killed him, yet the strike never landed. His hand had stopped her weapon, and instead of breaking her bones, he had steadied her. The fire in her chest had burned with confusion ever since. She followed him now, unwilling prisoner and unwilling ally. Her spear had not left her hand, though it rested against her shoulder rather than his throat. Every step they took through, the ruins tested the vow she had sworn and the bond she could not explain. The human did not treat her as a captive. He moved ahead with calm purpose, scanning the broken streets, checking shadows for dangers. His weapon was in reach, yet he never raised it against her. He glanced back from time to time, as if to make sure she still walked with him. She hated. That small part of her felt safer in his presence than she had in weeks. The night was full of hunters, both human and alien, and yet beside him, silence carried a strange comfort. Her oath weighed heavy, but her heart betrayed her with every quiet moment. They crossed into a shattered district where the ground still smoked from burning machines. Bodies lay scattered, alien and human alike, and she felt her chest tighten. War had taken so much from her. She clenched her spear and looked at him with burning eyes. She told him that his kind had started this fire, that every life lost here was written on his hands. He listened, but his gaze did not harden. He told her war was not his choice. He said he had lost brothers here too. His words struck like arrows, for she had never imagined a human speaking of grief in the same voice as her own. At a ruined arch, she tried once more to break free. She lunged forward, spinning her spear in a flash of steel, aiming for his side. But again his hand met hers. Not with violence, not with rage, but with a firm grip that turned her strike away. She snarled, demanding to know why he would not fight. He answered that killing her would change nothing, and killing him would change nothing for her people. The firelight caught in his eyes, and she saw not weakness but an unshakable will. The ground between them shifted in that moment, and her vow began to feel like a chain dragging her deeper into doubt. They found shelter inside the ruins of a temple, its walls cracked, its pillars half buried in ash. The human lit a small fire, with practiced ease, and the glow filled the hollow space. She sat across from him, her spear in her lap, her eyes sharp and unyielding. He removed his helmet, setting it aside. His face was marked with lines of fatigue, his jaw strong, his scars telling stories she could not read. She had imagined humans as faceless beasts of war, but here he was, simply a man. She hated the thought but could not look away. As the fire crackled, she asked him his name. The question left her lips before she realized, and she cursed herself for caring. He answered quietly, a name foreign to her tongue but heavy with meaning. He asked hers in return. She considered staying silent, but something in his voice pulled the truth from her. When she spoke her name, the sound seemed to bind them closer. The moment was small, almost nothing, yet it felt like the world had shifted beneath their feet. The night dragged on, and outside, the sounds of war still haunted. The air, she dreamed of vengeance, of striking him down while he slept. Her fingers curled around her spear, but each time she looked at him by the firelight, her hand refused to move. His chest rose and fell with steady rhythm, his weapon within his reach but never grasped. She realized he trusted her not to strike, and that trust burned hotter than any blade. Why would an enemy trust her? Why would he lower his guard when he knew she wanted his death? The question kept her awake long into the night. Before dawn, they heard movement beyond the temple. A patrol of soldiers passed, their armor clanking, their voices harsh. She held her breath, her body tense, ready to fight or flee. He placed his hand lightly on her arm, urging her to stay still. His touch sent a wave through her again, steadying her when she should have been fire. Together they waited side by side in silence until the patrol faded into the distance. When it was over, she realized she had trusted him without thought. Her vow to kill him felt weaker now, like smoke slipping through her fingers. The first rays of light broke over the ruins, painting the sky in hues of red and gold. She rose to her feet, her spear at her side, her heart heavy with conflict. He stood too, looking at the horizon as if searching for something beyond the war. She told herself that today she would end him, that her promise demanded it. But when his eyes met hers, calm and steady, her resolve wavered again. She hated him for breaking her hatred. She hated herself more for letting him. Yet somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that fate had already chosen. And so as the dawn rose over the ruins of a broken world, the alien warrior and the human soldier walked forward together, bound not by chains, but by a touch neither could escape. What had begun as vengeance now carried the weight of destiny. Neither of them knew where the path would lead, only that it had already begun. The ruins gave way to the wilderness. Broken towers and shattered steel faded into vast stretches of jagged cliffs and overgrown trails. The human led with careful steps, his eyes scanning the terrain, while the alien warrior followed close, her spear never far from her grasp. Each moment she reminded herself of her vow, yet each moment she betrayed it by walking beside him instead of striking him down. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crunch of stone underfoot and the distant cries of unseen beasts. The war was still near, yet something else pressed closer. By midday, they reached a ravine where the river once flowed strong but now trickled in a thin silver line. They stopped to drink, and she watched him remove his gauntlet, dipping his scarred hand into the cold water. She thought of all the lives his kind had taken with that same hand, yet when he offered her water from it, she hesitated. His gaze met hers, not demanding, not mocking, only waiting. Slowly, against her will, she leaned forward and drank. The water tasted like stone and memory, but what lingered was the heat of his palm beneath hers. She pulled back quickly, her face hard but her heart unsteady. As they pressed on, she asked him why he fought. His answer was simple, almost too simple. He said he fought to survive, to protect those who could not fight for themselves. She laughed bitterly, telling him humans were destroyers, not protectors. But his voice did not rise in anger. Instead, he told her of his village back on his homeworld, of families he had lost, of a war that had come to him long before he ever set foot on her soil. His pain was not unlike hers, though she fought the thought with all her strength. For the first time she realized humans bled in ways her people did, and grieved in ways she knew too well. That night they sheltered in a cave carved by ancient storms. She sat apart, her spear in her hands, tracing the sharp edge with her fingers. He sat by the fire, his back against the stone wall, watching the flames. The silence stretched long, broken only when he asked her what she vowed before the war began. She stiffened, for the vow of vengeance had carried her every step until now. She told him she had sworn to kill the one who stood before her. Her words were sharp, meant to wound, yet he did not flinch. He simply nodded as if he had known all along and said that fate was cruel to bind them like this. Something in his tone twisted her heart, for he spoke not with fear, but with sorrow. Sleep came slow, heavy with unrest. She dreamed of her family, of the flames that had taken them, of the vow she had carved into her soul. In the dream, she struck the human down, his blood staining the ground. But when she looked closer, it was not his face she saw. It was her own reflection, broken and hollow. She awoke with a start, sweat on her brow, the fire still crackling. He stirred too, his eyes catching hers. For a long moment they simply watched one another, no words between them, yet something unspoken rising in the quiet air. Dawn brought danger. From the cliffs above came the sound of voices, rough and harsh. Alien raiders, her own people, searching the valleys for survivors. Her chest tightened. If they found her with him, they would call her a traitor. Her vow would mean nothing to them. They would kill him and perhaps her too. She looked at him, his hand already reaching for his weapon, his stance ready. She whispered for him to stay low, and for the first time, she fought to shield him from her own kind. Her body moved, without thought, placing herself between him and the danger beyond. It was madness, yet it felt truer than the vow she had carried for so long. The raiders passed above, their shadows stretching across the cave's mouth, their blades glinting in the weak light. She held her breath, her spear poised, while he waited beside her. For a moment, one of the raiders paused, listening, and her heart thundered. She tightened her grip, ready to fight them all if she must. But the shadows moved on, the sound of their boots fading into silence. Relief washed over her, though it carried shame. She had protected the human, not slain him. Her vow was breaking piece by piece, and yet she could not stop. When the danger passed, she turned to him, her voice sharp. She told him this did not mean she trusted him, that he was still her enemy. He gave no argument, only a quiet nod. Yet the way his eyes lingered on her spoke louder than words. He saw the truth she fought to bury. She could not hate him as she once had. The fire in her chest was changing, reshaping into something new and dangerous, something her vow could not name. As night fell once more, they walked side by side beneath the stars. Above them stretched the endless sky, torn by fire yet still full of light. The war was far from over, but for these two souls bound by chance and touch, a different battle raged within. She had vowed to kill the human, but already she knew. The promise was crumbling, and fate had written a new oath neither of them understood. The road ahead grew harsher. Smoke from distant battles darkened the skies, and the ground shook with echoes of war machines. The alien warrior walked in silence, her spear steady at her side, while the human soldier moved beside her with watchful calm. Each step felt heavier than the last. She reminded herself of her oath, the vow that bound her life to vengeance. Yet every time she looked at him, she saw not the faceless monster she had sworn to kill, but a man with scars and eyes that refused to turn away from hers. It unsettled her more than the war itself. They reached a valley filled with the wreckage of fallen ships. The twisted metal lay like bones scattered across the earth, fires still smoldering in their cores. She felt the air grow thick with the scent of death, and her chest ached at the memories it stirred. Families lost, homes burned. She clenched her spear, whispering that this was the fault of his kind. He said nothing at first, only scanning the ruins for danger. When she pressed him, demanding he admit the crimes of his people, he finally turned and spoke. His voice carried weight, heavy with grief. He said war had taken everything from him as well, that blame fell on leaders who fed the fire, not those who bled in it. His words struck her harder than steel, for she could not deny the truth buried in them. As night fell, they built a fire within the broken hull of a ship. She sat across from him, her eyes sharp but her heart restless. He spoke little, but when he did, it was always with honesty that disarmed her more than any weapon. She hated how his voice softened the edges of her anger. She told herself it was a trick, a human tactic to weaken her resolve. Yet when she looked at him across the flames, she saw no deceit. She saw a man burdened with pain that mirrored her own. The thought terrified her more than any blade. Later, as the fire burned low, a sound pierced the night. A cry, small and desperate, drifting from the shadows. She rose instantly, spear in hand, scanning the wreckage. The human followed, his weapon ready. They found her, a child, alien like herself, no older than 10 seasons, huddled beneath a broken wing of metal. Her eyes were wide with terror, her body trembling from hunger and fear. The warrior froze. She had lost so many children in her tribe that seeing one alive felt like a wound reopening. She knelt before the girl, speaking softly, but the child only cried harder, shrinking back in fear of both of them. Before she could comfort the child, the human knelt too. He set his weapon aside, his movement slow, careful, as though approaching a fragile bird. He reached into his pack and pulled free a small ration, holding it out with an open hand. The child's eyes flicked between them, and at last she crept forward, taking the food with trembling fingers. She ate quickly, her tears still falling. The warrior watched in silence, her heart torn. Here was the enemy she had vowed to kill, feeding her people's child as if she were his own. It shattered something inside her, something she thought unbreakable. They sheltered the child through the night. She held the little one close, keeping her warm, while he kept watch at the cave's mouth. When dawn rose, the girl clung to them both, her small hands refusing to let go. The warrior told herself she would lead the child back to her people. Yet when she looked at him, she knew he would not abandon the girl either. Somehow, in the chaos of war, the three of them had become bound together. The thought stirred warmth in her chest, but also fear. For if her people saw her with him, they would call her a traitor. If his saw him with her, they would brand him the same. As they continued forward, the child walked between them, her tiny steps quick to keep up. The warrior stole glances at the human, and every time their eyes met, she looked away too quickly. She hated the weakness, hated how her vow felt more like a shadow now than a flame, yet she could not deny what she saw. Each time he lifted the child over rough ground, each time he shielded her from the cold wind, each time his voice softened to ease her fear, she felt her heart twist. She told herself it was only for the girl's sake, but deep down, she knew it was not. That evening, the child fell asleep against the warrior's shoulder. The firelight flickered over their faces, and the human sat nearby, silent and steady. She looked at him, her voice low so the child would not wake. She asked him why he had spared her that night when she tried to kill him. His eyes lifted to hers, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then finally, he told her he had seen something in her eyes that night, something stronger than hate. She felt her heart catch, her vow trembling like glass. She wanted to deny it, to strike him down and prove him wrong. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. And so, under the weight of the stars, the alien warrior and the human soldier sat together, bound not by chains or blades, but by something neither of them had chosen. The child between them breathed softly in her sleep, and in that fragile sound both found a reason to pause their war. What had started as vengeance was now unraveling into something neither could name. And though the world still burned, a fragile bond had begun to grow stronger than the fire. The valley narrowed into a passage of stone cliffs. Jagged peaks towered above, their shadows swallowing the path in cold gray light. The alien warrior walked ahead with the child at her side, her spear glinting faintly as she scanned the rocks. Behind them, the human soldier kept a steady watch. Though she told herself she did not need his protection, she found her eyes drawn to him when danger stirred in the air. The vow she carried felt weaker with every passing day, like smoke slipping through her grasp. Hatred had once been her shield, but now it betrayed her with silence. By midday, they reached the edge of an abandoned outpost. The walls were shattered, its banners torn, its watchtowers broken. Smoke still rose from blackened beams, and the warrior's heart clenched. She remembered when her people had lived here before fire and steel took it from them. She gripped her spear so tightly her knuckles ached. She turned on him then, her voice sharp with fury. She demanded to know if this too was the work of his kind. He did not deny it. His voice was heavy but calm. He said he could not change what had been done, only choose what he did now. His answer struck her deeper than denial would have, for she could not answer it. The child clung to her hand, her eyes wide with fear. The warrior softened her voice, whispering comfort. The human stood nearby, his gaze sweeping the ruins, protective and steady. She hated that she trusted him in this place, hated more that the child trusted him too. When the little one laughed softly at something he said, the sound pierced her chest. It was a sound she had thought lost forever, a reminder that even in ruins, life clung to hope. And for the first time she wondered if her vow of blood had already stolen too much from her heart. As night came, they sheltered within the broken outpost walls. The child slept curled in a cloak, her small breath steady. The human set a fire and the warrior sat across from him. The flames danced between them, shadows flickering over their faces. She studied him, her eyes hard, yet searching. She asked if he feared her still, knowing she had sworn to kill him. He met her gaze without flinching. He said he did not fear her, not anymore. His voice was steady, but his eyes told more, a truth she could not name but felt in the pit of her soul. The firelight caught her face, and for a moment neither of them looked away. Their silence was broken by a sound outside the walls. Boots on stone, voices speaking her language, her people. She froze. If they found her with him, if they saw the child in his care, they would call her traitor. They would not listen to her vow, nor his mercy. They would strike without question. Her heart thundered as shadows moved closer, torchlight flickering at the gates. The human reached for his weapon, but she caught his wrist. For the first time, it was her hand that steadied him. She whispered that if he fought, there would be no return. She told him to trust her as she had trusted him. And though it tore at her, he obeyed. She stepped out into the torchlight alone. The raiders recognized her, their voices calling her name with surprise. They asked why she traveled here and where her loyalty lay. She lied, her voice strong though, her chest ached. She told them she hunted a human soldier through the ruins, that the tracks led far beyond the valley. Suspicion hung heavy in their eyes, but her name still carried weight. They left with warnings promising to return. Only when their torches faded did she breathe again. She returned to the fire, her legs unsteady. He met her eyes, silent, but the look they shared spoke more than words ever could. The child stirred, in her sleep, and the warrior brushed her hair softly from her face. She looked at him once more, her voice low. She admitted she had betrayed her vow tonight, not by failing to kill him, but by protecting him from her own. The confession weighed heavy, yet strangely, it freed her heart. He did not gloat. Did not smile. He only said thank you, the words simple but full of meaning. For the first time, she felt the vow inside her begin to break apart fully, not from weakness but from choice. Later, when the fire dimmed, she sat awake, staring at the stars beyond the broken walls. She thought of her family, of her people, of the oath she had carried like a blade. Hatred had guided her steps for so long, but now it felt hollow. The human slept nearby, his face peaceful, his body weary from the journey. She found her hand drifting toward him, hovering above his shoulder before pulling back. Her chest tightened, torn between the vow of the past and the bond of the present. The child's soft breathing anchored her, reminding her what mattered most. And so, beneath the shattered sky, the alien warrior faced the truth she had fought to deny. Her vow no longer held power over her. The human was not her enemy, though war had named him so. He was something else now, something fate had bound to her with a touch she could not forget. The path ahead was uncertain, but one truth was clear. She would no longer walk it with hate in her heart, but with the bond that neither war nor vow could destroy. The dawn rose red over the valley. Smoke drifted in slow rivers across the horizon, carrying with it the bitter scent of war. The alien warrior stood at the edge of the outpost ruins, her spear in hand, her eyes fixed on the distant hills where banners of her people still flew. The child held her cloak tightly, whispering questions she could not answer. Behind them, the human soldier prepared his gear in silence. The air was heavy, for they all knew the moment was near. The world would no longer let them walk unnoticed. Sooner or later, her people would return and the humans would march again. The fragile peace they had found could not last forever. She turned to him, her voice steady though her chest trembled. She asked what he would do when his army called. He answered with honesty, as always. He said he would go where he was ordered, for that was his duty. But then he looked at her, his eyes calm, and said that if he had the choice, he would choose to protect what stood before him. His words lingered, striking deeper than any blade. She looked away, her spear trembling in her hand. The vow she had once sworn seemed like a shadow compared to the weight of his truth. By midday, their path led them to a ridge overlooking a battlefield. The ground below was scorched and broken, scattered with machines and bodies. She felt her breath catch as she recognized the banners of her clan among the fallen. Rage and grief rose in her chest and her fingers tightened on the spear. She whispered that humans had done this, that his kind had turned her home into ash. Her voice broke, raw with pain. He stood beside her in silence, his own eyes heavy, with sorrow. He did not deny the blood spilled, but he placed his hand on her arm. The touch steadied her, reminding her of nights by the fire, of the child's laughter, of moments where hate had no place. She wanted to pull away, but instead she stayed. As they descended into the valley, danger struck. From the wreckage emerged soldiers, her people, armed and ready. Their eyes fell on her first with relief, but then narrowed as they saw the human at her side. Voices rose demanding answers, spears pointed, blades drawn. The child clung to her leg, trembling. She felt the eyes of her people burn into her soul. They demanded to know why she walked with the enemy, why she carried him beside their own blood. Her heart thundered, torn between loyalty and truth. She could strike him down now, prove her vow before them all. Yet when she looked at him, steady and silent, she knew she could not. The moment stretched like an eternity. Her people shouted, urging her to kill. The human did not move. His weapon lowered, his eyes on hers alone. She lifted her spear, her hands shaking. The child cried out, begging her not to. In that cry, everything broke. The vow, the hatred, the weight of vengeance, all of it shattered. She threw the spear aside, the steel clattering on the stones. Her people gasped in outrage, calling her traitor. But she stood tall. She declared that she would not kill him, that fate had bound their lives together and no war would change that truth. Chaos erupted. Some of her people surged forward, ready to strike, but the human moved first. He shielded her and the child. With his body, his weapon finally raised not for war but for protection. She felt her breath catch at the sight. This man she had sworn to kill, now ready to die for her. In that instant, her heart chose. She seized another spear from the ground and stood beside him, her voice rising with a defiance her people had never heard. She told them she would fight for the bond she had found, not the hatred that had ruled her. The clash was fierce. Steel against steel, voices rising into the smoke-filled sky. When it was over, the survivors fled into the distance, cursing her name, vowing she would never be welcome again. She stood breathless, her body trembling, the child clinging to her side. The human lowered his weapon, his chest rising with slow, heavy breaths. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and in that look was everything: pain, loss, but also something unbreakable. She stepped closer, placing her hand against his. It was the same touch that had stopped her blade, the same touch that had broken her vow. Now it was the touch that bound her to a future neither had imagined. The child's small voice broke the silence, asking if they were safe now. The warrior knelt, holding the girl close. She told her yes, though she knew safety would never be simple again. But when she looked at him, she knew they had already chosen their path. It would be hard, it would be hunted, but it would be theirs. The bond between them was no longer chains of fate. It was choice, forged in fire and sealed in trust. As the sun set over the broken valley, the alien warrior and the human soldier stood side by side. Enemies no longer, vows broken, but a new oath born, one that neither war nor blood could take away. She had sworn to kill him, but his touch had bound her forever. And in that bond, stronger than hate, they found the only victory that mattered.